Hello everyone! Welcome to my channel. Today we are doing another mini book review, Recipe for a Perfect Wife by Karma Brown. It was a good book. I liked it. There were some things that I didn't like about it. It has two storylines that run parallel to each other and connect. And I'm really into that right now. I really like books that are like that, especially when they're well done like this one. So the things that I liked about it, I liked the two storylines. The two storylines were well done. The characters were interesting. One storyline was set in the 1950s, and the other storyline set in present day. So a quick summary is the one storyline is Alice, and her husband purchase a house. They move out of the city, Manhattan, into the suburbs. It's a little bit run down, it needs some work, but the husband has a life plan essentially set out for them, and he wants to progress in his career and own a house with a yard, and he wants to have a child or two with his wife. And so this house is just kind of the next step for them. Now the wife, Alice, yes, she was working at a PR firm and then she was fired, but the thing is she didn't tell her husband that she was fired. She told him that she quit due to a toxic work culture. There's some dishonesty that happens in the relationship, and then she is nervous about moving to the suburbs. She kind of seems like she doesn't really like change, and that it's very obvious in the story as the story progresses that she's really going through something. And then on the other storyline, the story is about Eleanor, who goes by Nellie, and she is a 1950s housewife. She recently got married to her husband, and just how she is a housewife. There is a lot of talk about miscarriage and struggling to get pregnant and family planning in there, so if you find any of those subjects triggering, this probably is not a good read for you. There's a lot of talk about Nellie's husband Richard and his stomach problems. I like Nellie as a character. She's a strong, independent woman, and I like that in her. Even though she's a 1950s housewife, she's a strong woman, and you can see that in her and in the decisions that she makes, and I like that a lot about her. I liked her storyline better than I liked Alice's. Honestly, I could read a whole book just about Nellie and Nellie's life and Nellie's family. I found her to be much more interesting than Alice. Those were the things that I liked. I liked the storyline of Nellie, less so of Alice. I liked the character of Nellie and her husband Richard, although I didn't like Richard as a character, but his character was interesting. Alice was alright. I had some issues with Alice, which I'll get into in a second. The book also provides recipes, which I thought were interesting. I did make one of the recipes for book club. I made the boiled chocolate cookies. They were good. They were really good. I love making recipes out of books just to see what they're like. These are very 1950s recipes. The recipes were part of Nellie's storyline. You know, there's a recipe for tuna casserole and a bread and cheese pudding, and very like 1950s food. You know, those like the era of like jellied salads that are questionable today. One of the things I liked about Alice's storyline, although she wasn't my favorite character, I definitely preferred Nellie over Alice. One of the things I liked about Alice's character progression was the way that she grew throughout the story to be more of a strong, self-assured, independent woman. In the beginning of the story, she was very apprehensive to move into this house. She was very comfortable in her city apartment, and she essentially was moving for her husband, and she made that pretty clear that there was really no reason to stay in their Manhattan apartment, and that she wanted to help Richard with his vision, and it was a natural next step for their relationship. And then seeing her kind of come into her own, she went from independent, career-minded woman to essentially a housewife. You know, there's the premise that she was working on a book, Although through the story, because she's kind of going through it and going through some things and working through the emotions of losing her job, she claimed to be writing a book, but it turns out in the end she never was. So how the two storylines come together is that Alice and Nate move into the house that used to belong to Nellie, and Nellie lived there until she died. So when they moved in the basement, Alice found a box of magazines, a cookbook, and then she discovered from her neighbor had a bunch of letters that Nellie had written to her mother. And so the neighbor gave them to Alice to help work on her book. And her book was going to be about the 1950s and being a housewife, essentially. As Alice reads through these letters and the magazines and the cookbook, she kind of becomes connected to Nellie and her story and, you know, what it meant to be a housewife in those days. So Alice learns how to cook and take care of the house and garden. Gardening is a big focus in this story as well. So I liked at the end of the book, Alice stood firm in her decision. Her husband is a bit of a numpty, and I really didn't like at the end of it how he accepted a job offer and then decided that they were going to move to California without even talking to it. I'm going to talk more about this in the things I didn't like about it. But I really liked how in that moment, Alice put her foot down and said, I'm not moving. By the way, I'm pregnant and I like this house. I've grown to love this house and I'm staying here. So I'm not moving. You know what? In her position, I'd probably do the same. You can't move across the country without discussing it with your spouse. I mean, he made that snap decision and that was rude. Let's get into things that I didn't like about the book. I felt like in Alice's storyline, I think that the whole background of losing her PR job, I think that just could have come out of the book entirely. I didn't think it lent anything to the story. I really didn't think that the Dorian storyline lent anything to the book. I think that that could have just come right out, and that space could have been used to talk more about Alice or about Nellie. I didn't like it at all. Same with Alice's best friend Bronwyn. I didn't think that Bronwyn lent anything to the story either. I think she could have just been removed entirely, and that space could have been used for a little bit more insight into Alice's mind and what she's thinking of in those moments. Bronwyn and the PR firm, I think, just could have been gotten rid of entirely, and that space used for something else. That's just my opinion, though. I kind of wish the writer had delved a little bit more into Nate's relationship with Drew, or lack of relationship, but maybe that was put in there intentionally. There's sort of a question mark of whether they're having an affair, whether it be physical or emotional. One of the other things that I was left with questions about was when I looked at Nellie and Richard's relationship. From the very beginning, it talks about Richard's stomach problems, and then of course at the end, Nellie poisons Richard with the foxglove. But I wonder if she had been making him sick the whole time, or if he was already sick and she just kind of helped the process along. That was unclear. So I'm curious to know what you guys think. If you've read this book, do you think that she was making him sick the whole time? Or was he already sick? Because it's very clear that he had stomach issues. Was it her herb mix that was making him sick? And was she doing it on purpose? So that she could gain the house and her independence? I wonder. I'm not sure. And we talked about this in book club as well. We weren't sure either. It's kind of left to your own. I'm not sure, and I still don't know where I stand on it, whether she did poison him continuously or not. I don't know. I don't know, guys. Oh, one of the other things I wanted to mention, at the very end of the book, at the end of Alice's storyline, where her and Nate kind of come together and reach a tentative cold peace, it's made very clear that Nate is resentful about not going to California, and he chooses to stay since Alice is pregnant and they're going to have a baby. He chooses to stay in the house with her to raise their family. I know that he's frustrated about not being able to progress his career as fast as he wanted by moving to California. I thought it was odd to end the book on a note that was questionable, in my opinion. So Nate calls Alice and says, "I'm not going to be home for dinner because someone was pushed on what I'm assuming are a subway." And I thought that was a very odd way to end it. Like, he couldn't have just called and said, "Hey, there's traffic, I can't get home," or "I'm working late on something, I'm not going to be home for dinner." No, it was someone was pushed onto the tracks, so the trains are delayed, so I'm not coming home. And I'm curious about what purpose that particular tidbit of info serves. It just seemed like a kind of odd way to end the story, in my opinion. I don't know. If you've read this book, let me know what you think about that particular ending. I'm curious. Those of us in book club weren't really sure what to think of it either. We all kind of thought it was odd that that particular incident was put in there right at the end. Someone got pushed onto the train tracks. Like, okay. Weird. I feel like there are 100 reasons why someone wouldn't be able to make it home for dinner from the city into the suburbs, but someone got pushed. That's the reason that's put in here. Overall, I did like this book. I will probably read it again. I feel like it's one of those books that you should read twice, just because there might be things that you missed in there. It's well written. I did like the characters. There were just those couple of things that I would have made different. I think it could have done with some more editing down and a little bit of expansion here and there. But overall, the book was good. I have no complaints about it. I've read worse books. I've read better books. It just kind of falls in the middle for me. This is the first book that I've read of Karma Brown, so I can't speak to her other books. If you've read other books of hers, let me know what you recommend. I would definitely read more of her books because I think that she is a good author. Anyways, that's my review of Recipe for a Perfect Wife. Overall, it was a decent book. I recommend it. I would avoid it if you don't like to read books about miscarriage or marital rape. There are some triggering subjects in there. It's a good one to read. It's interesting for sure. It's a quick read. I read it in a day. It wasn't a slog to get through. It was interesting enough that the story captured me from the beginning and I wanted to continue reading it to see what happened. So definitely recommend, for sure. If you've read this book, let me know what you think down below. I thank you for watching. Thank you for stopping by my channel. I appreciate you being here. If you leave a comment down below, I appreciate that. I hope that you are having a great day today. If not, I hope the rest of your day is good. If it's all just been garbage, I hope tomorrow is a better day for you. Thanks for stopping by. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye.